Hello and welcome to the Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm your host, Macie Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friend. If you've been looking for a podcast geared towards your growth, self-awareness, navigating your brain's daily mind drama, and deep inner work to become your highest and best self, you are in the perfect place. Let's get started. Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm Macie, and I'm so excited that you are joining us this morning or whenever you are. If you're brand new here, welcome. I hope that you love what you hear and that this podcast helps you because that's what it was designed and created to do. And if you're a returning listener, as always, thank you for your love, support, for sharing, for leaving reviews. Everything that you do, I appreciate you, and it does not go unnoticed. Before we get into today's topic, I do want to ask something of you. It's been a hot minute since I have asked for you all to take 30 to 60 seconds to leave a review on Google. This helps more people find me, and not only do I just love reading the ways that the podcast is helping you or the ways that coaching is helping you in your life, it's also a way that more people can find me, because when they do a Google search and they're looking for coaching or they're looking for anything related to self-growth, self-help, my stuff is more likely to pop up and land in their lap so that they can get the help that they need. So your review, even if it takes 30 to 60 seconds, it may seem so small and insignificant, but it's actually a really big thing. So if you are a regular listener and this podcast is helping you or has helped you in any way, shape, or form, I would like to ask that you go to the link in the show notes. I'll be sure to include it, and just take 30 to 60 seconds to share what you're learning or how it's helped you or why you like it or anything that you want to share. I just really appreciate it. And I know that whenever I'm looking for places, businesses, recommendations, it always helps for me, even on Amazon, to read what people have to say. That's something that I do with everything, whether it's a new restaurant in Las Vegas or, a place like a store. I'm always looking, Amazon reviews, I'm always looking at that stuff to see what are real life people saying about this product, about this business, about this experience. So you all doing that for me allows other random people that are strangers in the beginning find that review, see that there's real people that are experiencing the podcast, the coaching, and in turn, they can get the help that they need when you do that. So thank you in advance to all of you already who have done that, and to anybody that does take the time to do that. You have no idea how something so small can actually be really, really big in the long run. So thank you. All right, let's get started on today's topic. We're going to talk about gossip behavior today, okay? A few weeks ago, I got a message, and here's another thing. I love whenever listeners introduce themselves. I really enjoy meeting you, quote unquote meeting you, because I don't actually get to meet you in person and hug you, maybe one day. But I love whenever listeners reach out and say, hey, I'm listening to the podcast, or hey, I found the podcast. I live in such and such place. I recently met a listener that lives in Dominican Republic. So shout out to you. That was so fun. I have met listeners from Italy. I have met listeners from all over the United States that pop into my inbox and just say hi. And I just love that. And something that I welcome is whenever you all pop into my inbox and you say, hey, Macie, I'm listening to the podcast. I am all caught up, or I'm really close to catching up. Something that's been coming up in my life is XYZ. Do you have an episode on how to handle this from a coaching perspective? If I don't already have an episode to help you through something that's happening in real time in your life, you are always welcome to connect with me on social media, or you can shoot me an email. Just make sure you get into contact with me. Everything that you can find on me is on macierenee.com. But basically, you can reach out to me at any time and ask for a topic to be talked about if it's not already there. Because for me, I show up every single week to give you episodes, and this is my life's work. So sometimes for me, because I'm in it and have been in this work for about 8 years, it's so second nature to me at this point that sometimes I don't realize what people are still seeking or needing help with. And sometimes my brain offers that I'm being redundant, or that I keep talking about all of the same things and that you're not learning anything new. And that's the drama that my brain offers me 100 and X amount of episodes in, right? So sometimes when you're like, hey, this situation has happened, or I'm really struggling with this, or this is the drama that keeps coming up in my life, how do you approach this when you're being emotionally intelligent? How do you do it? That gives me new ideas, and it allows me to, help more people, because whatever you're struggling with is something that probably multiple people are struggling with. So I welcome that anytime. And several weeks ago, I had a message from a listener that found the podcast and asked me to talk about gossiping. She was asking, why do we do this? I know women and men gossip, but especially women, and especially like in the workplace, and it feels so toxic. I don't want to engage in it, but I can't help but feel sometimes I'm involved, and I don't know how to go about it. So I let her know, thank you for giving me that suggestion. I will put it on my list and we will talk about it. So today is your day. We are going to talk about gossip behavior. So, why do people gossip? Now, here's the thing. A lot of times, and here's the thing also, in movies and scenes that we watch all the time, music videos, all of that, we're kind of encouraged to engage in this kind of gossipy behavior. And I think it's only been in recent years, as self-help and personal development has become bigger, that more and more people are trying to talk about like how gossiping is just not the vibe anymore. It can be toxic, right? But typically the reason that people quote unquote gossip, and the way that I give the definition of gossiping, because again, all of our brains can have different meanings for different things. So when I think of gossip, I think about talking about people behind their back. I think about engaging in dramatic conversations that maybe I should not even be a part of, because it doesn't involve me whatsoever. And I also think of gossip as like getting almost like this, it's like this sick high where you're like, you shouldn't be listening, and you should turn your ears off, but you can't stop. It's like a train wreck that you just can't turn away from. And before you know it, you're in it. And in the moment that it's happening, it's like, oh, this is so bad, but it also feels so good to be involved in. And it's like, logically, even though you may be like, ugh, I don't want to be this person. Why am I being this person? You still grow your ear 20 sizes to know what someone's talking about or who they're talking about. You want to know all of the tea. There's memes everywhere that, have, spill the tea and here's the tea, and all of the things that people say nowadays to basically talk about what gossip is going down and what stories you don't want to miss. So it's very in our culture to do this, but it's also ingrained in us as humans. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you guys about today, is why this is and how to become more aware of it, so that if you don't want to be this person, if you don't want to engage this way, you don't have to. There is always a choice with anything. But the reason that people engage in gossip and talking about other people is because of a lovely chemical in our brain called oxytocin. You may or may not have heard about it, but oxytocin plays a vital role, especially for women, when it comes to childbirth and breastfeeding, and oxytocin plays a big role in our love and connection with other people. And because of that is why gossip is this feel-good thing, even if logically we don't want to be involved with it. So here's the interesting thing about oxytocin. Oxytocin is like the love drug. Okay, so it's a chemical that releases from our brain and makes us feel over the moon in love, and it operates in this very complex way within our body. But basically, whenever, I know that every woman that has probably had a child pretty much feels this way. It's like you can be in so much pain and have the worst birth story in the world, okay? Like I hear a lot of horrendous birth stories. It's very rare, I think, to hear beautiful birth stories as much as you hear horrendous, awful birth stories. But I tend to, what I love, by the way, this is a total side note, but I love hearing birth stories no matter what. Like if a woman, even a stranger at the grocery store, if someone is willing to share with me their birth story, I want to hear all about it. I don't have children yet. I have dreamed of having a water birth, all natural, since I was 12 years old. I used to watch, what's that show on TLC? A Baby Story. Like I used to watch it with my grandma all the time. And it's interesting because as a kid, what I noticed in watching that show every single episode, like seriously multiple times, is that the women that birthed in water a lot of times were way more calm and at peace versus the women. It was interesting in the hospital where they were like screaming and in all this pain, and it seemed chaotic, and it was just a different environment, whether they had an epidural or not. And so the pieces that formed in my subconscious as a kid was like, oh, this natural water birth thing seems to be the vibe. And it's interesting because the first thing I do in my life now, whenever I am stressed, if you know me, you know I live in the bathtub. Like that was the hardest part, aside from our awful neighbor in Las Vegas, was that we didn't have, one, our bathtub was disgusting and just unacceptable. And two, the water never got hot enough. And back home when I was in Kentucky, I would take a bath like every single day. And I soak for probably 2 to 3 hours. That is really, truly not a joke. It's the way that I decompress in my life. So the thought of going through something like birth and getting to do it in the water, even as an adult, my mind has not changed at all. If I can birth that way, that's probably going to be in my birth plan with a doula and with a midwife and all of the things. Anyways, that was my tangent. But all of that to say that the chemical in our brain, oxytocin, you can go through a very traumatic birthing experience, but as soon as they lay that baby on a mother's chest, have you ever noticed how it's like everything else floats away? And moms, you probably have had this experience. It's like they're still down there in your area working on things. There's still things that have to happen. And it's just like when you see the pictures, when you watch videos, if you ever did watch a baby story, like anything, all you see is the mom sobbing and like just so in love with this baby. And the reason being is your body floods, like your brain floods you with oxytocin, which is your love drug. And it acts as a natural painkiller. So it actually acts as this distractor from every traumatic thing that maybe you felt or went through. And all you experience is love. Now, what's also true is that oxytocin, when your brain produces enough oxytocin, it allows you to go into labor naturally, right? It allows you to breastfeed and love breastfeeding. So like the moms that are like super in love with breastfeeding, it's a lot of times because oxytocin is releasing. And the interesting thing about this also is if you tend to suffer from or struggle, I shouldn't say suffer, although it does feel like it's suffering sometimes, but if you tend to have the challenge of daily anxieties and depression, your body has a much more difficult time releasing oxytocin. And when your body has a difficult time releasing oxytocin, then that's sometimes why women don't go into natural labor, because natural Pitocin, I learned this years ago, but Pitocin is like the artificial oxytocin, which blew my mind when I found that out. And I have read studies that have shared when women have a lot of stressful situations or unhealed traumas, depression, anxiety, things like that, their body struggles to produce enough oxytocin to sometimes go into labor naturally. And therefore, sometimes women have to be induced and be put on Pitocin, which is like the synthetic version of oxytocin. Very interesting, right? So whenever you're in the labor experience, whenever you're breastfeeding, whenever you've newly birthed your child, whenever you fall in love, whenever you're around girlfriends, oxytocin is releasing from your brain. And it's making you feel all of these warm, feel good, I love my people, I love my person, I love my partner, I love my baby emotions. Okay? So that's kind of why we're wired the way that we are. And that's why no matter what happens with your child or how much struggle you go through, as soon as you look at them and see their cute little face, your brain goes bloop, 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 releases a bunch of oxytocin, and you're just like, oh my God, you can't do anything wrong. You're my baby. I love you so much. Okay, so that's kind of why that happens the way that it does. Now, with that being said, oxytocin releases when you're around groups of people and you're all talking and relating and getting along and finding human to human connection. Even if that human to human connection is talking about someone else. In that moment, what your brain feels is bonding. Okay? So even though logically you can be like, I don't want to take part in this conversation. I don't want to be involved in all of this nasty drama. I don't want to do it. This is not my highest self. This isn't who I want to be. But like somehow you still get engaged in it, or people try to pull you into it. Like what happens in your brain is your brain releases oxytocin, and so it feels like a bonding mechanism. It feels like something where you're connecting with another person, and that love drug releases, okay? So that is the reason why people do and engage in the, gosh, that grammar was so bad, but that is why people engage in gossipy behavior, okay? That is why a lot of women talk about other women or form a group, and they're like, I need to talk, I need to chat. Let's go to lunch and just catch up. Let's go spend time together. It's all because of that drug, which is very, very interesting, right? So here's what you do. If you know that engaging in this behavior is not something that feels good to you, one, you have to be aware of the human brain and how it operates, which I just kind of shared with you, right? So now it's in your awareness. If you allow it to be, it's going to be in your awareness. So that means whenever you get around family members, whenever you get around girls, women, or even men that are engaging in a lot of gossipy behavior, you know that their brain is feeding them a chemical to basically feel good. And you know that your brain may want to engage to also feel good. But if you're aware enough to know that engaging in that is not what you want to do because you don't like talking about someone else, you don't think that it's fair. It's like your beliefs need to be stronger than the feel-good chemical, okay? Which I think is very important work actually in our world, because if you think about it, you're like, if someone goes to alcohol every single time that they're stressed, or someone uses sex every single time that they don't feel good, right? They're like, I just need to like be in connection with someone. I need to be loved. Like I need to go have intimacy with someone. Or you go shopping. Like every single time you're stressed, you're like, I need to go shopping. That you're doing that for a whole different set of chemicals in your brain. Okay, like a whole different chemical is releasing in your brain that makes you feel good when you engage in those things. So you're coping, but you're coping with alcohol. You're coping with shopping. You're coping with overeating. You're coping with social media use, whatever it is, right? So what you really want to be aware of is that your beliefs about why you're not wanting to do that have to feel better than how you would feel using that coping mechanism. Make sense? So the first step is the awareness of, why do I want to engage in this? And sometimes it's because my brain tries to trick me into feeling good. Sometimes it's literally a chemical thing. My brain wants me to engage in this behavior because it thinks that it's going to feel really good. And the truth is, it probably will because it's all chemical based. However, what I have to realize is that I can outwit my brain, right? I can choose something different. So if my highest self doesn't want to engage in this behavior, if my highest self doesn't want to talk about another person to try and feel better or to get more connection with this group that's talking about them, I have to be aware that my brain's going to try to pull me in, but as my highest self, it doesn't feel good. So I'm going to choose something different. I'm going to choose to disengage. I am going to, maybe say, I don't want to talk about that, or I don't have any input in what you guys are saying. I'm, totally out of it. However you want to do that for you. Okay. Sometimes it could be leaving the area. If you can't leave the area and people are hovering all around and they're talking about it, putting in some earbuds or earphones, here's where your brain has to problem solve. Okay. Because a lot of times we think that we're automatically stuck. No matter what it is in our life, we tend to see things as a problem, but really struggle to find a solution. And what I want to offer is that almost always you can find a solution. It may not always look like one that you want. Like, for instance, let's say you're in a work setting and people always hover around your desk to talk about another person. And you're like, there's no solution because I've asked them not to talk about it, or I've asked them not to involve me. I've asked my boss if I can move desk and they said no. What are some other things that you can do? And you have to challenge your brain to find a solution for it. So that might be putting in headphones, right? Learning how to tune it out and focus on your work. Figuring out how to disengage from whatever behavior you're not wanting to be involved in. Okay. Now, years ago, I remember whenever I had my almost epiphany about gossip behavior and about just mean girl mentality. And I think that maybe will be a different episode because it has a lot to do with ego. Whereas this episode has a little bit more to do with just kind of teaching you how the brain works and uses oxytocin and whatnot. But years ago, I remember I actually was leaving a retreat when, and it's the one that I actually talked about with you guys just recently about the winter retreat that was in Pigeon Forge with my coach. I remember leaving that retreat and my best friend and I that, had gone with me, one of our conversations in the car was around me realizing how I had been engaging in mean girl, non-supportive mentality, almost not so much gossip behavior, but just behavior that it did not feel good. Once I had the awareness, it was just I don't my highest self does not want to spend my time this way. It just is, it's not productive. It doesn't feel good. What am I getting from, being this way about this other person or people or group of people or whatever? And it's just it takes up space in your brain that keeps you from focusing on something else. Anytime you're focused on another person, especially when it's not good focus, it takes away from something you can be doing that could be really good in your life. It literally removes energy that you can be using to pour into someone or to completely do something else in your life that's going to serve you much better. So you kind of have to decide, do I want to engage in this? Is this how I want to spend my time? I know my brain is going to think that it's serving me because it's a chemical thing that's happening. But I can choose to disengage even knowing that. I don't have to be in this cycle. I don't have to be this person. I can set boundaries. I can speak up for myself. I can remove myself. I can come up with alternative, methods to tune it out. I don't have to be this person. And years ago, I made that decision. I just don't want to be this person. I don't want to be this person. Now, sometimes there will be situations that come up where I find that here we are, and it's like, oh, why am I in this situation again? And when it comes into my awareness, because almost always now, with as much work as I've done, it doesn't feel good. Like, back in the day, it used to feel good. It used to be like the giggly, like, yeah, oh my gosh, I know. Like, let's keep talking about this, or let's move on to another topic, but keep going. These days, it just doesn't feel good. And so when my brain has that light switch moment of like, ugh, here it is again, I got sucked in and it felt good temporarily. When I think of the woman that I want to be, it just immediately is like, ugh, it makes me feel ill. I don't even want to engage in it. I don't want to be a part of it. And so I will make the decision to either disengage altogether, to change the topic, to point out that it's just not serving us to talk about it. It's just not useful. So you get to decide that for you as well. But what I hope that you get from this episode is knowing that your brain thinks that this is a totally normal thing to do because it loves connection. It loves bonding. It feels like a very loving thing to do to your brain because it releases all the lovey, happy chemicals. But just because it's doing that doesn't mean that it's actually serving you for your highest and best self. It also feels, when it's keeping you in your comfort zone, that it's doing its job. And we know that you don't grow unless you get out of your comfort zone. So a lot of times our brain releases all of these chemicals or has all of these mechanisms that, it thinks, oh, well, I'm keeping them as safe as possible. And I'm keeping them in the same place their whole life. So that way nothing ever happens to them. And it feels pretty cozy. But unless you practice the self-awareness to know that cozy doesn't build growth. Cozy doesn't get you to where you're actually trying to go. You have to be willing to push outside of the box and do the things that feel terrifying or scary or not as natural, make you feel a little bit uncomfortable maybe in the moment, and elicit emotions that you're willing to work through. Because again, when there's nothing you're unwilling to feel, there's nothing you're going to be unable to accomplish or do. So I hope that this helps you understand this a little bit more. When you see it, you can choose to disengage, okay? And you can't always tell everybody else what they're going to do and expect them to do it, but you can always decide what you're going to do and follow through with it, all right? I love you guys. Please, if you are enjoying these episodes, go to the show notes right now, click the link, leave a review sharing just what you're learning, why you love the podcast, why you enjoy it, if you think other people should listen to it, if you're a coaching client of mine, what you're learning through coaching, anything that you're willing to share. I can't wait to read it, and trust me, I would hug you in person if I could. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next episode. Bye.